Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, hello, good people. Welcome to the show Connected. I am your host, Andrea Dragonfly. We are heading into 2025, and last week I kind of started out this new year looking at change, how to embrace the changes that are going to be coming our way throughout this next year. And so this year is really going to be the catalyst of change, and we're going to start to see certain things really tangibly shift and change in 2026. But this is the year that the shifts begin. Now, if you missed my show last week, I have a bunch of links on my media page, and I was kind of connecting viewers to different astrology channels where a lot of this change is definitely kind of, articulated in a much deeper and more expert way with these different astrologers, which I am not. So I did want to highlight that though, because there is so much happening. And especially, I shared that I'm also in California this month, working on making some connections and doing some different things here. And then I'm heading back to this adventure I'm doing in Hawaii. And I'm not quite sure how long I'll be in Hawaii, but I'll be there for as long as I'm there. So I have the flexibility to kind of, just let the project, I'm working on this project, take me where it needs to be. So that's what's going to be happening. Now, what's interesting is that as this new year has really kind of come in, I talked about the LA wildfires, and I'm just north of them. And it's been a very interesting week to just kind of be tracking them in ways where, I also, where I'm staying, I'm staying in this little tiny pocket up in Ojai, California. So it's just this lovely little area. And we are surrounded in this bowl of, this nice little valley that it's kind of like a bowl that the mountains are around us, protecting us in some way, right? But however, all around us is the red zone to prepare for a fire at any moment, right? And so that's just been my week, and just noticing, being part of that, watching certain, watching life, watching people, watching the reactions and whatnot with the different people around me in the community, but also on the television and social media, and about so many people who are losing their homes and all their possessions. Like when the fires came and went through parts of LA, they didn't have time to sit there and think about, okay, what am I going to bring with me? So valuable possessions, photos, things that we'll never be able to get back again, right? And then also not just homes, but communities, schools, shopping centers, right? And the grief that has been coming forward with, of course, such devastation and such loss. And my heart for sure goes out to everybody. And this is following also the fall, and when we had the hurricane season and what happened throughout, the East Coast and Florida and all the way up, with some of the different North Carolina, the South Carolina, I'm not quite sure, all the different states that were incredibly impacted by such loss, homes just floating down the river. And then also being in Hawaii, I'm on the Big Island and I'm down over on the east side, over in the Puna area, which is south of Hilo. And in 2018, this is where um, there was a pretty significant lava flow that took out neighborhoods, and people lost their homes, and they had to move the livestock and the animals and everything. And so these are like these big losses that are coming through nature, and we're looking at having more of that this coming year. So it's definitely something that I wanted to kind of bring into the conversation, because this is part of change. This is part of shaking some things up, and that there's this incredible collective loss and grief through the devastation that happens when, the earth, quakes, whether it's these earthquakes that lead to lava flows, whether it's these wildfires, all of these natural disasters. And then, of course, we have other types of shifts and changes that bring us into our experience of how do we embrace this. So this was very much in my field this week. Looking at embracing the change, that's what I had titled last week's show. And it's kind of been with me all week about embracing these changes. And again, my heart goes out to all people who have gone through devastating change through natural disasters, and being able to communicate, being able to sit and talk with some of these different people. Of course, if you haven't gone through it yourself, you don't really know how devastating that can be. And I just look at my own experience and going through my own changes. Now, I still have a beautiful little home in Colorado. However, as I was preparing myself for this adventure, I had this feeling that I was never going to live in my home again. That there was something that was kind of pushing me out into the world, that Lakewood, Colorado, which I've been able to call home for 30 years, has met me for all of those 30 years in the way I needed it to. And now it's time for me to move on. And again, I don't know where I'm going to land. I know I'm working on this project, and I will share more about the project when the time comes. But right now, it's not ready to be shared just yet. But this project is taking me to different places, meeting different people. And it's putting me on the path of shift and change. My life isn't going to look the same. But none of our lives are going to look the same, right? We're all in it, even if we're still within our home, raising our families, or maybe we've raised our families, or maybe we don't even have haven't started a family or didn't have a family, all the variations of our human experience. So even if change isn't really big upon you right now, there's going to be other types of changes, even just the changing in the administration, the inauguration for Trump that's coming up this next week on Monday, right? And so the changes that will be happening, some people are, freedom of choice. That's one of the things that I'm deeply connected to, because I'm such a freedom fighter. I would say I'm, a justice seeker. I'm a spiritual advocate for justice and freedom and all those things that we can free ourselves and liberate, right? And so whenever we're put into a situation where other people have control over ourselves, our bodies, which is one of those things that I'm very much an advocate for, is to, liberate ourselves and not have anybody control our bodies other than ourselves, right? So, and you heard me talk in many of these other shows about power, control, manipulation, right? Like, who's trying to control you? The spiritual path is about us being able to make those decisions for ourselves, for us to also fight for what's real and important. And the fight doesn't have to be violent, But the fight has to take, we have to take that stand. It could be many ways that we stand up for ourselves. And this is where we're going, especially with Pluto coming into Aquarius now. The structures are going to be changing. The world is changing. I talked about this again. I keep repeating myself, but I repeat myself because I'm highlighting. I want to make sure that these points are really landed in the viewer, because the world will never be the same as it was before. I mean, even COVID, right? COVID was also a huge shift. And with COVID, we now have more remote jobs. I know that I've heard some stories about how the new administration wants to kind of get rid of some of that. But nonetheless, there's so much happening with technology, with AI, with, all the things, right? Technology in particular, medical, the medical realm, all sorts of, leaps and bounds and in us moving forward. But also, there's going to be a lot of information coming out. And we've already been in a information war. I kind of spoke about that at different times, but an information war has been going on for at least since the turn of the century, of the 19th century into the 20th century. And people can be talking about propaganda and kind of, manipulating beliefs and stories to make people think certain things, or only sharing half truths, right? So that you hear, telling people what they want to hear, but what's not really going on behind the scenes that people don't want to, because if people did hear those things, they would object. They'd be like, yeah, no, that's not okay. So half truths are told. So people are like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. And the part that the people don't want to hear, because it affects them in some way, is hidden. And so we've been manipulated by those hidden stories for a long, long time. And a lot of that is going to come to the surface. So that's also happening. And so kind of moving into the loss, moving in back to what's happening, even just with, these devastating experiences that we go through, connecting into that, feeling into that loss and that grief of even just listening to stories, whether they're online, through, different interviews or whatnot, through the media, or even talking to a few people myself about that, right? And knowing that loss like that can be sometimes traumatic, in that there are, huge attachments that people can have, and rightfully so. When you lose everything that you own, you can have some attachments to some of those things, but it also profoundly brings us into an awareness of what is important, especially if everybody's lives were safe and secure getting out of that situation. We also know that people's lives are lost during these events, that animals' lives are lost during these events. And I feel sometimes being deeply empathic to that, and not just the animals of people's homes, but the animals in the forest, being, a Coloradan for 30 years and knowing the devastation of these fires in the forests with the elk and the deer and the bobcats and, all of the mountain life. And, so just being connected to the depth of loss. And so looking at how we move into this new year, I wanted to connect into that these are passages, and that even in my energy healing service, my business is called Dragonfly Passages. And Dragonfly, and how Dragonfly came to me and to my family, because it's not just my name, it's my family's name. And and I'll share about that. And I may have shared about that before, but I'll share a little bit about that now, because it's a process of evolution. And of course, dragonflies have been around for millions of years. So huge epochs of time. I don't have all of that information in front of me, but I know that it's been like, I don't know, however many million. It could be anywhere between 35 million and I don't know. So it's, but they came after the Jurassic period. So I know that part. But nonetheless, they have evolved over time through the pressurization of our Earth, of the changes, right? And so, of course, they were much larger and now they're much smaller now. And so it's through the process of like how things that were really big now kind of get smaller and smaller through life and earth changes. Now, when I was brought to the dragonfly, I was pregnant with my daughter. So I was in my first pregnancy, and I was with my ex-husband Michael, who is my children's father. And I already knew that I was not traditional, that I wasn't going to carry the father's last name, and that he and I were going to come together and we were going to build our family together. And partly because my father, my ex partner, my ex husband came from a divorced family where he didn't really have a strong connection and relationship with his father, and so the last name didn't have the same. His last name didn't have the same depth of connection and lineage that maybe many last names, especially traditional last names do. And so he and I were both very open to kind of, moving past tradition into creating a newness for ourselves. And what ended up happening is that when I was pregnant with my daughter, we were working on an organic herb farm in Virginia. And every siesta during the hottest part of the day, we would get into the rowboat and we would go out into this beautiful green pond. And he would read The Hobbit to me. And I would take off all my clothes, of course, right? And I would be in the rowboat and I would have the sun with my, kissing my flesh and my hands and possibly like one of my feet kind of dragging on the water and just kind of like having the most incredible, experience, of course, listening to The Hobbit and the dragon and all the things. Now, it happened to be the most beautiful place for dragonflies, and there were innumerable dragonflies, hundreds, and they would be landing on us and just floating and flitting about, landing on the book and on his head, like multiple on in his hair and on my pregnant belly and on my toes and anywhere. And this was like a whole month long process. And so in the process of that, this is how Dragonfly became our family name. And of course, my daughter and her brother, going through their lives, they're like, and people saying Dragonfly, what an interesting name. And they're like, oh yeah, my parents are hippies, right? But it was something so much more magical. And it wasn't even like we're hippies, but we were just tapped in and the recognition of Dragonfly and how Dragonfly really is about evolution. Now, I'm going to come back and we're going to jump into that evolution and about the evolution within our lifetime through change and how we are the only thing we can, the only thing that we can rely on that's constant is change. And that is part of the Dragonfly medicine. And so we're going to take a quick break, 2 minutes. Join me back here and let's dive further into that and look at attachment, non-attachment, detachment, all the things that will prepare us for change. All right. See you here in a minute.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Okay, welcome back. So we are talking about change, and we're talking about just dragonfly and dragonfly passages. And so looking at the passages of our lives, looking at how we move through life, and the different people that come into our lives, the different experiences that we have, the different places that we have lived, right? Communities that we've been connected to. And so our lives are just this incredible journey, of course, right? So wherever we are in it. And what I'd like to do is just kind of speak to certain parts of the journey, which ultimately is about a blessing and about gratitude. So I've been also thinking about the Thanksgiving show I offered up back right before the holidays, right? And the practice of gratitude. And where we are, first of all, we are so lucky to have these lives and to be alive at this time, because this is a huge shift. This consciousness is awakening around the globe. We're moving forward. We, back in the 2012 prophecy, there's all sorts of stories about humanity moving forward. The end of the world as we know it back in the 2012 prophecy, right? And so we're just so lucky to be alive during these huge shifts, because this literally is moving us from the old version of being human into this new version of where we're going in humanity with all the technology, and that's going to play a really significant role for us and what's to come. For who knows how long, right? I have no idea. Maybe forevermore. And so first of all, I just want to kind of move into that we in this life, from birth to death, go through a series of shifts and changes, right? Whether it is a rite of passage through those main aspects of growth and development, from being a baby into the toddler, into the adolescent child, into the teenager, young adult, right? And we have these milestones that we celebrate. And then we come into our own, individuality, right? Or come into our, some people celebrate the 16 or the quinceañera at 15, coming into, the community, being, moving into dating, moving in from the I and the me into the we, into partnership, into marriage, right? So these are very significant rites of passage that we've all gone through, and that, and have been acknowledged and celebrated since the beginning of time, even in all cultures. And then pregnancy and bringing life in, right? And having the first children, if you choose to have children. Not everybody's choosing to have children in this world now, right? So, and then as we move through, and I talked about the seasons, around summer solstice. So everything's connected. That's the name of the show. The connections are just innumerable. Everything is just connected, connected, connected. And here we are in these passages where we go through and we have different types of loss. And those aren't always celebrated. Those are some of the hardships. The rites of passage, in rites of passage, it's not like, oh, you're no longer with your significant partner. We're not celebrating divorce. Well, some people are celebrating divorce when, when they're like, oh my God, I'm so glad to be out of that relationship. But it also can be very painful, right? And so those are not necessarily the rites of passages that are celebrated, but they are so hugely important because they are those shifts and changes. It's about evolution. It's about our growth, right? And so it's about these attachments. An attachment is also, I just kind of want to come in, is also when we are really kind of connected emotionally or even dependent upon either a person, a thing, or even an idea, right? So I'm getting this is my definition I pulled up for attachment. I Googled it and it was like an AI thing that kind of spit out like, here's your definition. So it's an emotional connection or dependency on a person, thing, or an idea where someone feels strong, like a strong need to hold on to that. And by all means, the things that we've been, we've come into in our lives are these gifts. And so my encouragement is to look at, when we find an attachment, and I've had to look at this myself as a person who travels. And then I also have to, when I travel, I rent my home out. And I take my personal things that I have an attachment to, right? And I put them in a safekeeping, and they're off property and they're secure because I have these attachments to them, might be whatever, right? And then the rest of my home is furnished, and I rent it to the traveling professionals, and I have to be non-attached to any of the things that are left in that house. So if somebody takes my favorite spatula, they take my favorite spatula, and I'm like, oh, I really loved that spatula. And I'm sad not to have that spatula, but I got to be with that spatula for however many years, right? And I can go and get a new spatula, and maybe the new spatula might be even better than the old spatula. But even though I really love that one, that person so-and-so gave me that spatula. And I know I'm saying this about a spatula, but I do like my spatulas, right? I mean, but take it with anything, my couch, if something were to happen with my couch, spillage, stains, it's about being grateful for the time that I've been able to have those things. And we're talking things, and we're talking home. And I have to honestly say that, yes, I put some of my things away that I have attachment to so that I would still have them at some point in the future. And I know for people who've gone through devastating loss of lava flows, of hurricane flooding, and of fires, wildfire, see if I can get the word out, fires, that they never had time to do those things. So that devastation of loss. However, there's also the impermanence that as we go through life, nothing is permanent. This is part of the Dragonfly passages, that we go through these cycles, and the cycle will bring us this beauty and the joy to be able to live in a certain area, to be able to have this community, to have these friends. But sometimes we need to move on, right? And as we move on, we are grateful for the time spent, for those relationships built. And those relationships, if you build them and they're solid relationships, they're always going to be there, right? Even if you all move into different directions, you're going to be able to connect, and maybe these are where the reunions come in and whatnot, right? So those relationships are there. Or maybe they're not, and you build in new relationships because everybody's different, right? We all have different ways we connect into relationships. I'm also even kind of feeling that within relationships right now is like, all of this is coming up for me in my own personal experience. And so just as relationships are shifting, where some people that maybe I was really connected to, excuse me, I have feels like a pet hair on my lip balm on my nose. Excuse me. Let me scratch my nose. But anyway, so shifting, where friendships are shifting and we have to go in these different directions, and maybe we're not as close as we once were before, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to come back around and reconnect and even become closer again. I mean, I'm always the firm believer in that, especially those people that are really important to us, when we go on these different journeys where we're not talking as much, connecting as much, seeing each other as much, that there's the opportunity for us to come back together and even grow more beautifully, more in sync, more deeply, because it's about the respect, it's about the love that says, hey, you have your life to live, I have my life to live. We're going to be more rich in our experience of living, and we're going to have a lot to share with one another, right? And so when you come back, you share that. I'm also the kind of person that loves to be connected to my people, my past boyfriends, like even my ex-husband, like the people in my life. I like to still honor them and be connected to them, even if that relationship needed to move on. The resonance in those relationships were not right, and we knew, like, if you're in a relationship and the resonant in the relationship isn't right, and you're not thriving, and you're not really your best self in that relationship, then it's time to thank each other for that and move on, but honoring each other too at the same way, in the same respect. And of course, we can still be hurt. We can be attached to the good parts of that relationship that we don't want to let go, right? And that's understandable because that's human. That's us being human. That's the human experience, the human condition. And that's what is our opportunity to learn from, is how do we take those attachments, and when we no longer have access to them, how do we get right? How do we get energetically right? And so this is where we move into that non-attachment. And that non-attachment really is the letting go of that emotional, like, stronghold, right? That emotional need to hold on to that. Even those things that I put in a separate little box and gave to my family to hold for me while I'm traveling, even if that house, heaven forbid, I'm going to knock on some wood here, that their house went up in flames and all my things went up in flames with it. Yeah. It's, okay. Thank you for those wonderful things. And some of it's like lovely, beautiful, expensive jewelry, all those things that I don't want to be traveling with, but, things. And, but how grateful I was to be able to wear that jewelry when I was able to, right? Even though, I may no longer, I mean, right now I still have it, but at the same time, like, if I were not to have that, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I know you're following me here. So moving into that place of non-attachment. Now, one of the things is that I know that non-attachment is a huge Buddhist practice, and I'm not Buddhist. Eastern philosophies is not something that I dove into in my studies of wisdom traditions so much in this lifetime. For whatever reason, it just never truly um, presented itself to me in a way that was like, oh, I have to go study that, or I have to jump into that. Now, do I already know it on a deep energetic level? I do. I feel like I know a lot about it. It's not part of my practice in this lifetime, in this incarnation. This incarnation is more Western esoteric wisdom school traditions, which actually are steeped in old Vedic traditions. It is connected to um, the Eastern philosophies already. It's just not along the Buddhist or Hindu track, right? So, but I know a lot about it. I just don't. It's not one that I deeply kind of sought to know. So, but I do know that within Buddhism, non-attachment is a practice. And what I loved is my sister, when she was still alive, I was down the Western herbal kind of earth-centered, shamanic, witchy type of track, and she went down the Eastern philosophies track, and we were a perfect complement of East meets West. And even back in those days, we talked about having some sort of, you know, center where we were the yin yang, and we were the East meets West version, and we could offer all sorts of different things. But that was the dream way back, 15 years ago. And so with non-attachment, if you're if you're a student of that philosophy and you already have a non-attachment practice, that's great. I'm just giving you what I know. I'm giving you just the information that comes from the culmination of different wisdom traditions that I've been connected to, right? And so within that, this is that place for us to really honor that which we have had and be grateful. It's part of that gratitude practice. And it's that place where when we can look at some of the most beautiful things that we had the opportunity to spend time with, including people, partners, even if it's the ex-partner, um, beautiful friends along the way, right? Even in loss of death of loved ones, we remember, it's not that when I talk about non-attachment with the death of loved ones, we will always be connected to those people, but it's about attached to the pain of that loss, right? That loved one knows that we deeply, profoundly love them. And through their death, they give us an opportunity to really know life. And that's the beauty of the death process. And of course, there's many other beautiful things that come with that about, you know, relationships. When a child dies, they came in to really bring the beauty of love to the parents. And I know that there's a lot there, and there's a lot of different ways children die. So there's I'm not going to go into all those details. Okay, but the biggest picture of all is like in the loss. It's that we are so grateful that we got to spend time. We got to know that person. We got to be with that person. We got to be the light, shining for that person, or that person was a shining light for us, right? And and again, and those are same thing with our pets, same thing with our things, right? So we're going to take another quick break, and I'm just going to leave you just connecting into what are those areas in your life as we go into break here for 2 minutes, just starting to feel into what are the areas in your life that you have a notice attachment to. Because we're going to also step into the conversation of detachment as well, and just kind of play with these for a little bit more as we finish out our time together. Okay, I'll see you back here in 2.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. Yeah, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey, okay, welcome back. Also, just so you know, I'm pretty sure you know, this is a live show. And at the top of the screen is the number. You could always call if you have any questions, any comments, if you want any type of clarification. Now, my mom and I were chatting, and I was, talking to her about how, I've never really had any phone calls. And the conversation comes up about how sometimes people are afraid to ask questions, right? Now, I'm talking about a lot of things here, a lot of things that are not common. So I want to also say that if you ever have a question, it's going to be invaluable for a lot of other people, right? Because everybody else is waiting for somebody else to ask the same question, right? So if you're one of those people, I encourage you at any time that you're welcome to make that phone call, or you can always go on to the YouTube or, and type your message into the comments or whatnot and share comments there too. So I just want to remind everybody that that is an option, right? And especially about my language. We all have, a different kind of lexicon. Like, I know that I have one in particular because my life has been steeped in this area for so long. I forget that many people may not know the general conversation because it's been my life, like when you're, when that's been your life and you've been speaking and using those words forever, you forget that they may not be the normal general words that are used in the everyday world elsewhere. So again, any of that stuff, I invite you to ask, for clarification if that comes up. Now, getting back into non-attachment and looking at attachments. Where are we attached, right? Who are we attached to? And I know that there's a whole lot that can go on into that conversation because that's a whole psychology on attachment. I know that this in itself could be days on end workshop here, right? Or class, or, a dissertation for your doctorate, right? All the things. So, but it's really just to kind of look at the attachment as we're moving into change. What are we attached to on a global level? Now, I just jumped to the furthest part of all of that, right? Because we're looking at, personal stuff, right? Our family, our community. and then we can like bridge it out, and then there's like, beyond our community, it could be our area, our state, right? And then it becomes part of our region, part of our nation, part of our continent, North America for us, several of us, me, and then, like, so, and then the world. So these are all bigger systems within systems. These are called fractals, like all of this is fractaling out in these larger forms of, there's different things that we might be attached to our freedom. What does that mean? Do we really truly have freedom in the way we think we do? Right. So anyway, moving into non-attachment again, which is the letting go of that emotional hold. It's just being like, okay, I love you, and let you go. And again, within practices, the practice of a non-attachment, when we can honor that with gratitude, we can really begin to liberate ourselves through the innumerable cycles of change in our lives. Because we're always going to go through something. It is just part of being human. And, it's not always going to be the celebrational, like, oh, yay, I'm retiring. I'm going to have the retirement party. We're going to have identity crisis. We're going to have, all sorts of different things. Currently, I'm in that phase of my life where in my astrology chart, I'm going through my midlife crisis. And people who are near my age, I have my Chiron, conjuncting my Chiron right now, which is the wounded healer, right? And so all the things that I'm trying to overcome in my life about my, whatever my insecurities are or whatever, are happening to me right now, right? And so it's like, wow, this is really crazy. Life is intense. I'm fully in it. I'm traveling. I'm all over the place, and everything is shifting and changing, and all I can do is hold on. I feel like I'm on this, this whitewater rafting. I'm in my kayak, and at any moment I could flip over and just kind of like hit my head on a rock even, right? Like, this is what I've always been afraid of. Kayaking in the Rocky Mountains is like, yeah, that's a real thing. It's dangerous, right? So I'm navigating my own changes, right? Just life changes, everything through this, but through non-attachment, through love and gratitude, through appreciation, right? And so, and also knowing that I'm going to stand for what is true and real and important for me. And I'm going to find other people that resonate with what's true and real and important for them too, like environmental causes, which is part of what my project is about. I'm working on this really big environmental project, which has taken me to Hawaii. I'll tell you that much, right? But I'm not going to go into the details yet. But then we have, elements of detachment. And detachment is very, very different than non-attachment, because detachment is back. It's kind of like, love and hate, attachment, detachment. And I talk about, like, I was talking to a friend recently, and it's like, hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is just wounded love. The opposite of that energy is indifference. Now, I learned that somewhere along the way. Sit with that and see how that feels for you. Because you might be like, no, I don't like that. And that's fine. You don't have to like that. Because attachment is where we're emotionally attached to something, this need to hold on to it. And then detached, some people will see it as like a complete lack of emotional connection, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a complete lack of emotional connection. It can also just mean that it's distant from one's connection. For example, with war that's happening, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's over in Israel, I'm feeling I'm very empathic to the horrors of the war, but I'm at a certain level, I'm detached from it because I don't have family and I don't have lineage and I'm not connected to those lands in the same way. So I'm a little more detached from the war, even though war is is horrendous. And we can all have our own experiences of what that feels like for us, knowing that these wars are going on. It's not personally affecting me. So I have a later I have a detachment in that because it's there, but it doesn't mean that I'm not emotionally connected to it, right? So moving into that place of non-attachment is that it's happening. Now, this is in the 7 levels of energy. It's I talked about the 7 levels of energy, and there's the first and second. The first one is like victim at the effect energy. Second one is anger energy. Third one is problem solving and just like, you know, um, coping strategies. Fourth one is service and love. Fifth one is problem solving, but also like kind of diplomacy and really like, the 5th level of energy is really about like, leadership. And then we have the 6th level of energy. And this is about this. Now we move into the level of transcendence. And this is the 6th level of energy is wisdom. And then the 7th level of energy is passion, but not passion in like an intimate romantic way, but passion in creation way, like creation, like creating a story or music or whatever, the creation of anything, right? But wisdom is that level 6. Wisdom is that things are happening in the world to grow and expand humanity. War is happening so that we will take a stand in some way to stand up for what's right. Whatever's right for you. Because your right and my right may not be the same, right? Right? But within this place, this is that wisdom. Non-attachment is connected to that wisdom. That everything that's happening in the world is happening to evolve us, to grow us, to pressurize us, kind of like a diamond. When I was going through college and I took geology as my science, right? I loved that class. I should be a geologist. And the rocks and the crystals, they're amazing allies, and we're going to talk about those too. But how a diamond is formed, and this diamond plume is through heat and pressure. And it's just like, all of that, and that's what pressurizes us. That's what creates the diamond within ourselves, the diamond in the rough. That's what evolves us into our greatness, is when we're pressurized, when we're uncomfortable, right? The uncomfortability is when we grow. We have to make new choices. And if we make choices in the higher vibrations of love, compassion, forgiveness, I've been talking about that all year long. This is where we use that. This is where we use that for our grief and our loss. If we were to have that. If we were to, wherever we are, whatever might happen, whatever's coming down the pike for us, right? So, so detachment and non-attachment are completely different. Again, I'm just going to come back to detachment, which can imply a complete emotional disconnection, which it can imply that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's fully what that is. But we can detach for certain things, which it's not in our field. We're not going to feel the same way. We're not going to have that same element of attachment. We can just be like, yeah, I'm a little detached from that. It's not in my awareness. It's not in my field. And I'm not talking about war. I'm just talking about anything, like, remodeling and whatever. I'm here with my friend who is actually remodeling the bathroom, and I'm doing my thing and he's doing his thing, and I'm a little detached from his project, but I'm still consulting and giving him ideas, right? But I'm detached. Like, he gets to do whatever he wants from it. I don't care. But here's some thoughts, here's some ideas, right? So I'm not attached to, scenarios. I'm not attached to the outcome. And that's what it comes down to, especially if you're in the line of service in any way. We cannot be attached to outcomes. We offer up, well, first of all, we have to find out what kind of service we're in and what we're being asked. If we're being asked for ideas and guidance and consultation and consulting of certain things, that's one thing. If we're coaching, we just bring that person to the realization themselves, offer up some things and have them work through it, right? So of course, there's no attachment. Everybody gets to have their experience to life. It's everybody's essential spiritual opportunity. If somebody's telling you what to do and you're not asking for it and you're not wanting that information, then they're hindering you or they're hindering your process. But maybe part of the process is for you to stand up and say, thank you so much, but yeah, no, I need to make these decisions, right? For me, I need to make what's best for me. So there's this conversation tonight, and of course I call it a conversation, even though I'm the one chatting about it, is really just here to bring into you. I know I'm running out of time. I invite you to take this further into your week, into change, because the world is going to be presenting lots of change and connecting into what you might find, that you have attachments towards. And then also recognizing, what you might be detached from, and the practice of non-attachment and, playing with these, because they're all very uniquely their own. And we all, as humans, have our own relationship to each one of those. So again, I invite you to be with the energetic of attachment. What are you attached to? And then the energetic of detachment. Some people see that as emotionally being emotionally distant, even detached. Play with that. How does that live in you? I invite you to your own practice of non-attachment. And if this is a new concept for you, great. Look some things up. Go onto the internet and the YouTube and go, whatever it is. And if you already have this practice, deeply instilled within your being, and you already are in the practice of it, congratulations, and share that again with others, because this is that year that I think that this will be important. So with all of that, we are nearing our time together, our end of our time together. And I also just want to apologize if you reached out to me on one of my Facebook or Instagram at connected.dragonfly and I did not get back to you. I want to apologize because I'm not the best, but I'm trying every day to be better. You're always welcome to reach out. Reach out to me at my website, www.andreadragonfly.com. Hit me up on the Facebook or the Instagram or the whatever. Those are the two places, because that's where it's at, right? I think TikTok's going away, but I don't have that anyway. So anyway, that's what I got for you. Enjoy. Take care. Stay connected. Connect into these concepts. And next week I'll be in San Diego, so I'll see you there. Take care. Have a good week.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.